Coming up next, when art rocks, the works of New Deal era muralist Conrad Albrizio.
The frescoes that Albrizio did for the state capitol, for instance, here in Baton Rouge, that is very consistent with this earlier kind of academic and very figurative style.
The subtle art of making wine.
We hope this will be sustainable, and we have to figure out what that means.
An artist's discovery of unique forms within the wood.
And one of the things that you learn in hollowing is to kind of visualize that space on the inside as a 3D map.
And the unlikely history hidden in the LSU Campanile. That's all next on Art Rocks.
Art Rocks is made possible by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you.
Hello, and thank you for being here for Art Rocks. I'm James Fox Smith, publisher of Country Roads magazine. Murals and frescoes created in the 1930s by New York-born artist Conrad Albrizio still grace many public buildings all over Louisiana, including our state capitol. They depict iconic scenes of American agriculture and industry, and these New Deal-era masterpieces are both beautiful and educational. LSU art historian Darius Spieth gives us some insight on Albrizio and his enduring visual legacy.
Conrad Albrizio was a mid-20th century painter. He kind of reached his peak during the 1930s through the 1950s, really the period of the Second World War and the immediate aftermath of the war. He was a muralist, so he painted wall paintings such as the ones that we see here at Allen Hall at LSU. Stylistically, these frescoes are very, very close to what he did, only that they were painted by his students at LSU in the late 1930s. And so these frescoes actually talk about the arts and sciences on campus and the agricultural aspects of the state of Louisiana, industry and so on. So this was a student project that was done under his supervision. This is what we call true fresco. It means that you actually have a plastered wall and you just paint on it. There's another method for doing frescoes where you actually have wet plaster and you have the pigments that soak directly into the plasters. One would have to look very, very closely to see the differences between the work of his students and Conrad Albrizio himself, because these differences are very subtle, and it's a testimonial to the very close collaboration between him and his students. Also, in keeping with the style of the times, you really wanted to have a kind of almost heroic figure. Even these experiments, the students and the professors here come across as heroic figures, and likewise if you look at other frescoes by Albrizio himself, you see the same kind of insistence on these aspects. Perhaps the best known example of publicly accessible murals by Conrad Albrizio can be found in the Union Station in New Orleans. Now, that dates from 1954, and by this point in time his style has changed. So these murals are much more Cubist inspired compared to these that you see here. So they are much more modernist in a sense, and very, very colorful. So it's a kind of very colorful, kind of Cubist inspired work that you have there. The frescoes that Albrizio did for the state capitol, for instance, here in Baton Rouge, that is very consistent with this earlier kind of academic and very figurative style that you also see here, for instance. Now, most artists abandoned figurative art completely. If you look at Jackson Pollock, for instance, he paints abstract expressionist drip paintings, so he starts out with this very figurative style, gets completely away from it. That's not the case here with Albrizio. Now, of course, he worked also in other media. In order to do murals, you need to have preparatory drawings. So we do have a lot of preparatory drawings by Albrizio. He was also very interested in mosaics. And I think this interest in mosaics can also be attributed to his Italian heritage, especially in northern Italy, the area around Venice, Murano. You have a very, very strong tradition of mosaicists, artists working in mosaics, small pieces of generally glass that are embedded in plaster, and it's a very ancient technique, goes back to medieval times, goes back to Byzantine times really, and there are specialized schools in the north of Italy for doing mosaics, and there are some mosaics by him that have come down to us as well. Conrad Albrizio was born in New York to Italian immigrant parents. Italy has a long tradition of great muralists, going back to Michelangelo and so on. So there is certainly something of his heritage that comes through in this preference for murals. But also keep in mind we're talking about the 1930s here, so this is the aftermath of the Great Depression and the New Deal era. And for the one and only time, the federal government actually directly subsidized artistic projects. It's called WPA art. Within the context of WPA art, you'll find a lot of art that was created for public buildings, post offices, but also state capitals. Conrad Albrizio actually did some murals for the state capitol, the press room, and some of the courtrooms. Some of these frescoes have been removed and found their place in a different context, but in any case, he was involved with that. What stands out about Albrizio really today is because he's a historical figure. He's a very important painter in the state of Louisiana. He really represents the style of regionalism, as it was also called. So there was a lot of kind of turning back to the rural core of America at this point in time. And he is descriptive of this day and age. We do not have that many painters from this day and age. There are, the mentalities are captured. The style also is very typical for this specific period. Nobody would paint in this style today. The values of this period are also captured here, diligence, hard work, and so on. That's, I think, the historical dimension, the historical value of this art, and the opportunity this art affords us to kind of travel back in time to the New Deal era. To my knowledge, he never met Diego Rivera. Some of these Mexican muralists actually came over to the United States and worked here. If you go to Dartmouth College, for instance, there are some interesting frescoes by one of these Mexican muralists who came over. And of course, a lot of American artists at this time, even Jackson Pollock, one of the key figures of abstract expressionism, actually for a while studied with one of these Mexican muralists. So that was something. There were a lot of exchanges going on. But given that Bricio was really based in Louisiana, in New Orleans, that was not one of the hotbeds a lot of these exchanges took place.
Albrizio moved in some rarefied circles. While in New Orleans, he socialized with the likes of authors William Faulkner and Sherwood Anderson. No matter where you live in Louisiana, opportunities to connect with the arts are everywhere. You just need to know where to look. So here's a few of the many spring festivals, exhibits and shows coming up around the state. To learn more about these and other events in Louisiana, visit the website at lpb.org/artrocks. For more about these and other events, snag a copy of Country Roads magazine. There are racks all around town, and also the Art Rocks website has an archive of previous episodes. So to see any segment again, just log on to lpb.org. Now, a man pursuing a passion for the fruit of the vine. After a long career designing interpretive museum exhibits, Jerry Eisterhold tells us how he added the title Midwestern Winemaker to his resume.
Meet Jerry Eisterhold. He holds a degree in design, photography, and agronomy. Was the third best soil judge in the Big 8. and is the owner and lead designer of Eisterhold Associates, a museum exhibition design firm that has worked with everyone from the Universal Islands of Adventure Jurassic Park Discovery Center to the Rosa Parks Museum and countless others.
When I started, there wasn't a school where you could go and study museum design. The quip I make is that it was all due to bad guidance counseling, that no one told you that you were supposed to get a job in what you were trained to do. In my naivete, thought you would get a job in something you thought you were interested in, figure it out.
Fortunately, that paradigm has been a very successful one for Jerry.
The mindset you start with is naivete and stupidity, because you don't know much about it. But as you sort of come to learn it, you have to kind of keep mental breadcrumbs as to how you came to learn and understand it and recreate that experience.
Take the American Museum of Tort Law. How do you best parcel out a branch of the legal system for the casual patron?
We created a series of graphic novels where each different case was assigned to an artist or an illustrator. Well, the concept took about 5 minutes, but the museum we've been working on since 1999. There's a couple of categories of cases that we talk about. This is the one that sort of established the principle of an attractive nuisance. It was a much beloved case, the case of the flaming rat. One of my favorites is not shown here, but it's the legal phrase is res ipsa loquitur, which means the thing speaks for itself. We try not to just do the same old design solution. That means you have to some extent, kind of think things through from first principles every time.
Like, say, when the Johnson County Museum proposed moving the approximately 1,300 square foot all-electric house to a new home inside the old King Louis.
Some of the issues that we're trying to solve at this very, very early stage is simply how people are going to move around in the exhibit, and generally how the content's going to be treated. And we're also trying to figure out a graphic treatment, because one of the things everyone assumes that history is sepia-toned. And, you know, we're talking about the 50s and 60s when there was a lot of color. There was a lot of attraction to the suburbs back then. And we're trying to give people a sense of what it was like back then. You want to look at the trends that were happening in, say, transportation or education. And then whenever those trends were disrupted, you know, what made that change happen? And was it an idea, a person, a technology, or what have you? And that gives you, those are little lessons that you can learn so that when you're thinking about whence Johnson County is going in the future, where might those changes come from? I guess I would say that the field in general has been confusing enough that it's retained my attention, because you're always learning about a new topic.
Jerry's other passion started when he found a book by famed viticulturist T.V. Munson.
This is the vineyard. We are located here so that I could also pursue, in the spare moments, this little experiment with Native American grapes. As a kid, growing up on a little farm, mid-Missouri, we were upstream on the Gasconade River from Herman. So, you know, it's basically the German culture that says you have to make wine out of something. So we did, in that case, out of wild grapes, which I recall to this day were pretty good and better than the Manischewitz, etc., that you would, you know, find at the store that was American.
A notion which prompted the name Terravox, or Voice of the Land. And as most will attest, wine is best when properly paired. So too with Jerry.
We have friends who like to describe us as food and wine. And so Jerry does the wine part and I do the food.
But that's hardly all she does. From the hours of 7 to 3, Kate can be found at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, where she's the senior conservator of objects, making incredible discoveries.
We were asked to clean off some of the corrosion products to reveal this gold surface, and so I very carefully under the microscope picked it off with a scalpel, and it's sort of like removing rust. It's very hard to do, and you have to do it very carefully so you don't scratch the metal underneath. And one of the real pleasures of this was not only revealing the gold, but finding the fingerprint of the last person who actually handled this before it was wrapped in the silk cloth.
From burial antiquities to caring for an intricate 16th century altar.
This is another one of my favorite projects. It's a shrine from India, and it had been in storage for so long that nobody quite remembered it. It was all in pieces, and the curator wanted to explore what we could do with it. I mean, is it possible to clean it? It was filthy. It looked brown. It was not at all interesting to look at.
It took Kate and a colleague nearly 2 years to etch away the centuries of grime and reveal the dazzling handiwork beneath. But ironically, while Jerry and Kate's work both hinges in the museum scene, their approaches couldn't be further apart.
We're kind of professional enemies, actually, because designers want to show art in the best possible way, and they want it on display for a long time. They want lots of light so people can see it. They want to do fun things with the artifacts, and conservators tend to be, well, you know, that's not really a good idea. We're about the preservation side of it, and can't we just put it in the basement in storage and not ever have it out so it'll last forever? So it's a bit of a conflict professionally, but we get along really well.
As of last night, we still had the ability to make each other laugh. I think we appreciate the simpler, quieter things in life, although she might not believe it sometimes with the pace that goes on. But there is an appreciation of just being able to sort of sit and have a good meal and a little conversation.
I never thought I'd stay in one place for as long as I have. I always thought I'd be traveling around and what they call a conservation gypsy. Jerry's worked really hard at trying to make it work for me in every way, too. So it's his dream, but it's also mine.
And as for the dream of American heritage grapes at Terravox,
We hope this will be sustainable, and we have to figure out what that means. With vintages of 2 cases, it's not like we can, establish presence on a shelf in a retail outlet. So people have to be willing to come up here and explore along with us, and we'll either find those people or we'll go and make a nice lawn if this doesn't work out.
Columbus, Ohio wood turner Devin Palmer crafts handsome bowls out of the cross-sections of logs. His vessels represent family, the breaking of bread, community and craftsmanship. So let's take a trip inside Palmer's studio to see what he sees in the wood.
I work with trunk sections of logs. I'm looking for hardwoods anywhere from 10 inches up to 30 inches. And it needs to be kind of fresh. I would actually take a tree that was standing that morning and turn it that afternoon if I could. Just because the wood's nice and wet, it's very stable, it's easy to cut. So it's the use of a lathe to make round things out of sometimes green wood, sometimes dried wood. I do everything from making salad bowls. That's probably my mainstay, kind of functional art, to architectural things and more sculptural stuff. When we're actually cutting, the wood's moving about 25 miles an hour underneath the tool tip. Today that'll be anywhere between 1,200 to 1,300 RPM. I work with things called gouges that help cut and sever the wood fibers. I also work with hollowing tools that are more of a scraper. It has a little cutting tip that I'll guide throughout the inside of the piece to literally scrape the inside out. It makes it actually, I think, one of the safer kinds of woodworking because you're holding on to the things that's sharp. One of the measures of quality is having an even thickness, having it be a little bit lighter than you expect. So as I start to hollow this piece, I'm going to check my thickness, and I'm going to use that thickness and how it progresses to figure out where I need to go. That's one of the reasons why I typically have very smooth curves on the outside. It makes my location very predictable. And one of the things that you learn in hollowing is to kind of visualize that space on the inside as a 3D map. So you generally know where your tool is at and you develop a relationship with it so that you don't go through the side or have it catch and explode. Typically when I make a wooden bowl, I'll rough it out into a rough shape and leave it extra thick so that when it dries and warps, I can get a perfectly round circle out of it. So I have 300 to 400 bowls sitting down in the basement, just slowly drying over the course of 5 years, anywhere from a year to 5 years for larger bowls. And as I pull out of that cache, I'll throw more in. This wood has been infested with the emerald ash borer, kind of an invasive species that was carried over from China that has really decimated the ash population here in central Ohio and really across the Northeast. And had this wood not have been infested by the borer, would it be this interesting? The fact that it can kind of move on to the next step in its evolution, almost like a phoenix type rebirth, I think gives it value and gives it power, and is a good kind of analogy for the way that we learn and the way my students learn, because you have to kind of sometimes make those mistakes to figure out where the gaps are so that you know better for the next time. I really like for people to use these things. The more they use them, the more connected they're going to be to them. So I'll put on walnut oil, or I've started using flaxseed oil that's partially polymerized. It'll actually harden into a soft finish that the end user can maintain. And for some of the other more decorative or artistic pieces, I'll typically use lacquer or other things like polyurethane. I don't let the wood tell me what it wants to be. It's just wood, it doesn't know, right? So I'll have a very, very specific objective in what I want to see out of that. And that's part of the skill of it, is bending the medium to what I want it to be. So as it approaches that final vision, that's when I know it's done. Now sometimes along the way, you know, wood's like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get until you're finished. In fact, that's the secret to having everything turn out perfect, is never telling anybody what you make until you're completely done. That way it always turns out right.
The LSU Clock Tower, or Campanile, is perhaps the most immediately recognizable symbol of the state's flagship university. Not only does the tower stand for the heights of academic achievement, it also serves as a reminder of Louisianans' military contributions in times of conflict. In 1919, LSU President Boyd asked architect Theodore Link to design a memorial in honor of the Louisiana men who served during World War I. 1,447 Louisianans died during that war. The plans were being drawn as a new campus was being built. The tower was assigned a prime piece of real estate along Highland Road, a site that gives students and visitors a clean view of the tower as they travel along Highland Road. Boyd made sure people can drive around the parade ground and get an even closer view of the 175-foot tower from their vehicles. Symbolically, the structure guards the academic community by the men who fulfilled their patriotic service and an administration looking out for students, according to LSU professor Paul Hoffman. In 1928, the state legislature approved funding for a bronze plaque identifying the Louisiana natives who died during World War I. Somehow, the names of the soldiers from Point Capee Parish were left off the plaque. However, a poster has been added featuring the names of those soldiers. A lantern also hangs from the dome of the building, symbolic of knowledge. It can be hard to believe, but illiteracy still prevents millions of Americans from reading and writing with fluency. But some local communities are tearing down convention and making access to books a priority through grassroots efforts. One Ohio community has created little libraries with the help of private and local partnerships. Here's that story.
We wanted to do something different and unique for National Volunteer Week. So Hands on Central Ohio partnered with BESA to come up with this free little libraries project. And really the goal is to promote literacy in our community and provide an opportunity for kids to have access to free books as well.
So the Columbus Dispatch, they donated 6 newspaper dispensers to Hands On and to BESA, and those 2 organizations came together with some of our partners to paint them and make them into little libraries. And so all around Columbus, we're going to place these little libraries in places where kids don't have as much access to books, and that way they can take a book, they can leave a book, and hopefully enjoy reading.
Yeah, really the goal is, some kids may not have transportation or they're not walking distance to go to a library. So that way we're putting them where kids are already located. So a community center, an after school center. So they can, while they're already there, they can have access to books and they don't have to go to another location. And the site locations are Directions for Youth, which is on the east side of Columbus. They have an after-school program there. St. Stephen's Community House, as well as the John Maloney Health Center on the south side of town, and then J. Ashburn Jr. Youth Center on the west side. And then there's also Franklinton Gardens, 2 garden locations that will also have a library as well. And we're also so excited about the number of book donations that we receive. We have over 700 book donations. Melita Foundation provided books, as well as McGraw-Hill Columbus Library also donated books as well, so we're really excited.
100% volunteer driven. And a lot of this is made possible by companies who just donate time, donate supplies. The paint was donated by Sherwin-Williams. The dispensers, like I said, were donated by the Dispatch, and then the volunteers come out and paint everything. We do a lot of projects. BESA manages about 30 service projects a month. We do a lot of one-off projects, community drives. This one is one of the ones that has received the most attention. And so people from companies, from individuals, have really stepped up and said, this is fantastic, we need more of this in the community. And so we're looking to do more little libraries, yeah. I think it brings together so many different types of people. You need to be creative to paint the libraries. I think people understand that education is obviously very important, reading is important, and expanding opportunities for kids, for children to get books, it's a win-win.
It's an opportunity for a child to keep a book in their home.
I think it's really cool to see so many people coming together, rallying together for the common good, for Columbus.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Art Rocks. But remember, you can always watch episodes of the show at lpb.org/artrocks. And if you want more, Country Roads Magazine is a great resource for learning all about what's going on in Louisiana's vibrant arts and culture, close to home and all around the state. So until next week, I've been James Fox Smith, and thanks for watching.